Hello, B1 family, and welcome back to the YouTube channel, The Big Black American Secret. My name is Daniel Jackson, and I'm going to read the goal of this YouTube channel before I get into the topic. The topic of this video is going to be, and I mentioned that I would do this on my last video. In this video, I'm going to explain to you the origin of the system of racism, white supremacy that we are currently in. The origin. A lot of people think it started hundreds or maybe thousands of years ago in Europe, but that's just not the case. In fact, the current system of racism, white supremacy that we're in right now is only 162 years old. 162 years old. That's almost not even two people's lifespan. Some people live to be almost 100 years old. So it's fairly new. And to me, that's good news. But the goal of this channel is to build an unstoppable army of knowledgeable, black, melanated people in America and around the world that understand we as melanated people have one enemy worldwide, and that is the system of racism, white supremacy. Our mission through education is to replace this evil system with the system of freedom, justice, and equality as laid out by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. We will need your help in building this knowledgeable army. You can help by subscribing to this channel, by donating to this cause through CashApp or PayPal, and by sharing the videos you watch here and any knowledge that is shared. In doing so together, we help fertilize the mentally enslaved, colonized minds of black melanated people worldwide, creating the perfect mental conditions for our children to grow up in a better, more balanced world. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's video will be in the description. My email is in the description if you want to sign up for my classes. I do teach. There's a $49 video information only or $199 coaching class, which includes the video material plus coaching or hand-holding is what I like to call it. And again, do share this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon and hit all so that you'll be notified of new videos or if I go live. Very important. Now, again, in this video, to me, it's like a discovery. It's like when you discover something that everybody needs to know. Well, let me back up a little bit. The name of this YouTube channel is called The Big Black American Secret. So the secret is you are an Aboriginal American. And again, join this channel and watch a lot. Go back and watch all of my videos. There's bits of information in each and every one of them. My goal is that you will learn who you are, your Aboriginal American past, talk to your oldest living relatives, do your own genealogy, because we cannot trust DNA. DNA is scientific racism. It's given to us to further the lie of the system of racism, white supremacy. You can't rely on a DNA test because, well, I'll just tell you this. DNA test from dry bones to live humans, they won't allow that in court. The only DNA test they allow in court is from live person to live person. I'll give you an example. For paternity test and for rape kits. Any other DNA tests aren't really considered in a court of law. You understand what I'm saying? And I won't go deep off into that. But in this video, I'm going to prove to you that the current system of racism, white supremacy is only 162 years old. It started in 1859 with Charles Darwin's book. He wrote a book. And I'm going to see if I don't get the book's name. Well, it was a book on natural selection and the origin of species in 1859. So when his information started circulating, it started to embolden the white-skinned Europeans here in America and then worldwide to take on the persona that they're superior. Okay? Now, I've got this thing wrote out pretty good, and this ain't gonna be a short video, I can tell you right now, but it's gonna be very eye-opening, to say the least. And I'm gonna say let's just get on into it, okay? I have a document that I'm going to read, what this document is, it's a primary source. Benjamin Franklin, I believe he's on one of the dollar bills, and he is one of the forefathers to the United States, and he's a primary source. What does that mean, primary source? Well, he was there at that time recording what he saw. He is a very credible primary source. You don't get no better as far as sources than primary. You understand what I'm saying? That's firsthand evidential. Primary source, okay? So there's an article that he wrote in the year 1751. He was real upset that England wanted to send a whole bunch of German people here. You know, he was highly upset about this. And he voiced his concerns in an article called Observations. And this is the article I'm going to read from. It's the Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind in 1751. And this is a picture of Benjamin Franklin, okay? So, and I'm going to scroll down to about the last couple of paragraphs in this writing, and I'm going to start reading. This article is important because, again, he is a firsthand witness to what I'm pointing out to you, okay? And again, he was highly upset when he was expressing his things here. Now, again, and the Germans were labeled Palatine Boers. You know what I'm saying? Now, it says, and since, this article is proof. It's proof of a lot of things, but it's proof of, one, not all Europeans were white skinned. In fact, the majority of Europeans look like you and I. Okay? He also points out the fact that the American Indian looked like you and I. You understand what I'm saying? Primary source, very powerful article. When I was first turned on to this article almost a year ago, a lot of this information which went clear over my head because I didn't understand a lot of things that I understand now. But anyway, I'm so glad to be a person to bring this information to you. Hopefully, you'll take it in, you'll do your research, and then you can get this information out to the people who you love and care about. Because that's what it's all about, people. Okay? We're in a war, and it's a war we're going to win. Because our enemy is the system of racism, white supremacy, and we're going to replace it with the system of freedom, justice, and equality as laid out by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. And how do we do that? How do you destroy the system of racism, white supremacy? Well, you shine light on it. You educate people as to the fact that, one, the system does exist, and two, how did it get started? What are the factors? Once you understand something, you can easily destroy it. But if you don't understand something, hell, if you don't know something exists, it's going to just be beating the hell out of you, and you're just going to go crazy in the process. You be seeing a lot of your brothers and sisters walk around here crazy. That's because the system is just beat them all the hell up, and they don't know what to do. They're lost. They're just gone. Mental illness. This system causes black people mental illness. So we have to fight it and destroy it. Okay? Now, and it's the last two sentences of this article. It says, and since detachment of English from Britain sent to America will have their place at home so soon supplied and increased so largely here, why should the Palatine Boers, those are Germans, be suffered to swarm into our settlement, and by herding together establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adapt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? Which leads me to one remark. The number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. He's a primary source, and he's telling you white people who are the skin color white worldwide is very small, and they always telling us that they are the majority and that we are the minority, that our numbers are small, when in fact, our numbers are great. Melanated people far outnumber Caucasian people or people with white skin. Okay, so that's another huge part of this informational piece. Okay, and I ain't mean to sidetrack it, but that's primary source telling you, and this is back in 1751, that the number of purely white people in the world is very small. I'm going to continue. All Africa is black or tawny. Asia, chiefly tawny. I'm gonna pause right there for a minute and let's find out what the definition of these words mean. Tawny. Well, Asia. Well, there's one more word I want to get before I do definition. All Africa is black or tawny. Asia, chiefly tawny. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. America, wholly so. America, black and tawny. And Europe, the Spaniard, Italian, French, Russian, Swedes are generally what we call swarthy complexion, as are the Germans also. The Saxons only accepted, who with the English make up the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. He says, the Saxons and the English make up the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. White colored people, skin people. You understand what I'm saying? Now there's three, I think two words here we want to look up. Swarthy and tawny. What does that mean, right? Okay, so tawny, I got a definition pulled up here. Tawny, it says tawny dealing with fur, hair, fur, or skin is a pale brown color. So tawny is a brown color. Okay, now let's look up the other one, which is, and I hope my computer don't crash on me. You know, I got a lot of tabs open. It's an old computer, so please be patient. Please forgive me. Okay, so swarthy. The definition of swarthy, of dark color complexion. Dark color complexion, right? So put that back where it belongs. Now, so go back to that article. Okay, so on the face of the earth. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back and read that part, but I'm gonna add in, instead of saying the word tawny or swarthy, I'm gonna say what the definition of it is, so it'll make more sense to you. You see what I'm saying? These words have allowed us to be misdirected. You know what I'm saying? And we're not going to be misdirected any longer. So I'm going to go back a little bit. It says, which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. All Africa is black or brown, and it still is today. Am I right? Asia, chiefly brown. Those Chinese people that you see, if you go back to the 17, 16, 1500s, the Asian people were a brown color. They weren't pale Asians like they look now. A lot of them look like you and I, but with different phenotypes. Very true. So Asia, chiefly tawny, chiefly brown people. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. America, exclusive of the newcomers, black and brown people. And it still is today. Okay? And in Europe, the Spaniards, the Italians, the French, the Russians, and Swedes are generally what we call a dark complexion or a black complexion. They look like you and I. As are the Germans also. Germans look like you and I. They're black people. Saxons only accepted, who with the English make up the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. So let me finish this article, then I'll talk about it. I could wish their numbers were increased. He wished it was more white people. And while we are, as I may call it, scoring our planet by clearing America of woods, and so making This side of the globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of inhabitants in Mars and Venus. You know, like if you was way up in the sky and you was looking down at the Earth, like if you was a space person, you know, if that makes sense to you. And why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? Why should they bring over more dark-skinned people? Okay? Why increase the sons of Africa? Of course, sons of Africa are dark-skinned people. You know, by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding all black and browns of increasing the lovely white and red. Now, of course, they're the white people, but the red, those are the Indians, right? Those are the Indians, the red people. So let's look up the definition of the color of, well, before I do that, let me do this. This is a 1-cent copper penny. Would you say that it matches the color of the back of my hand? It's damn near identical, right? So, okay, so we're going to Google the color of a penny because red. He said red, right? You know, 1-cent copper penny, copper. I'm okay. Anyway, I apologize. Let me just stay focused because it's real important. Okay, I'm gonna Google something real quick, and I hope my computer don't crash. I really don't want it to crash because I got a lot of tabs open. Okay, so I'm gonna look up the definition of American in the year 1828. The Webster's Noah Dictionary. Okay, and I'm gonna read it. Turn this around. It says 1828 definition of American. 1828 Noah's Dictionary. A native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Okay, and that's kind of why I compared this to my copper-colored. This penny is made out of copper. Now, what color? What's the description of copper? Okay, copper. Okay, copper is a reddish brown color. Copper is a reddish brown color. Okay, so when he was saying that, he says, in the sight of superior beings, darken his people. Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them here in America, where we have such a fair opportunity by excluding all blacks and browns, and of increasing the lovely white and brown people that are already here. Your ancestors and mine were already here. We're not West African slaves. They didn't transport us here through the transatlantic slave trade. That was it was a lie. It was a misdirect. The slave trade that took place on this continent was called the International. Matter of fact, I'll pull that up too while we pulling up definitions, because I want y'all to be able to go to these definitions yourself. I don't want to just tell you something and not pull it out for you. Okay, so International Indigenous American slave trade. International Indigenous American slave trade. International Indigenous American slave trade. I'm going to turn this around. It says the International Indigenous American slave trade. European colonies purchased indigenous people as slaves as part of the International Indigenous American slave trade, which lasted from the 15th century, which is the 1400s, to the 19th century, which is the 1800s. Okay. Now, that slave trade started sooner, lasted longer. In fact, it started with Christopher Columbus in 1492. Okay. I'm not going to get deep off into that, but you have a point of reference. You can Google that yourself. Transatlantic slave trade was not only told to us in reverse, it was a cover story for the slave trade that really happened, which is this: the International Indigenous American Slave Trade. Now, and we're back to this article from Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin was explaining to you that the majority of Europeans in the world are black and brown, swarthy and tawny. The American Negro, miscategorized as African American, is brown, is black and brown as well. And this was in 1751, and we still are. This hasn't changed, right? So, and again, what I'm going to prove to you in this video is that how the system of racism, white supremacy started, and the fact that it's only 162 years old. If you know something and how it started, you can destroy it rather quickly and easily if you know the origins of it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so, and I'm excited about this topic because it's like a breath of fresh air. As opposed to me think I'm fighting some system that's thousands of years old, it's only a few hundred years old. I mean, that gives me a lot of confidence. You know, so let me continue. Now, there is a video, and I guess I can close this tab. So that it don't crash on me. So now let me go to and I don't want any copyright strikes. Fair use is for entertainment purposes only. So I'm gonna show you a video. There's a young lady. She's a doctor. She's probably older than me, but I call her young lady because who cares what the hell, right? She's going to explain to you about white people in America and how long that term has been used, right? So let me get this queued up for you, and let me turn the camera around. Okay. All right. Okay. And again, like I'm saying,
white people did not exist before 1681. Again, white people planet Earth until 1681. Number two.
I'm gonna repeat that.
Again, white people did not exist on planet Earth until 1681. Number two, any claim that this group called white people, any claim that that group is rooted in biology or derived from genes or biology or is innate or is from nature is a lie. Third and final point. As a matter of foundational law, actually let me say it this way, white supremacy has been embedded in the United States of America from its founding as a matter of law. Now, I don't expect you to buy all that, to get all that, to believe all that, at least not now. But my job is to share with you the legal history that proves each of those three claims that I begin with. So let's go. Let's get started. We have to begin this conversation in colonial North America, specifically in the colonies, the British colonies of Maryland and Virginia. Both were British colonies and both shared a number of particular characteristics. First, their economies were rooted in tobacco farming. If you know much about tobacco farming, it requires tremendous human labor. Lots and lots of workers. So those who owned large plantations, big landholders, constantly needed laborers to do the work to grow the tobacco. In addition to sharing an economic base, Both colonies had an incredible gender imbalance, roughly 10 men for every woman. Now, let's understand a little bit about the folks who constitute the people in these two colonies. Oh, and by the way, let me give you a year. We're in the early 1600s, okay? The early part of the 17th century, colonial North America. England had, for some bizarre reason that today demographers cannot explain, there was a population boom in England.
Now, I'm going to pause that. She says, for some reason, so some unexplained reason, there was a population boom in Europe. And she's going to say that, they wanted to send a lot of people to America from England, but they can't figure out where these people come from. Well, those people came from the 11-Year War, which started in 1641 and it lasted through 1653. This was the English Rebellion of 1641 through 1641. The Confederate War, which was 1642, and the Cromwell conquest of Ireland in 1649 to 53, and the War of the Grand Alliance, Williamites and Jacobites War of 1689 to 81. England was at war with Ireland, and a lot of those people they held as captives. They sent those people who were Irish, black Irish, probably some white people too, black and white Irish, but mainly a lot of, from what my records show me, from what I've seen, there's a lot of Irish people that look like you and I, and Germans. So when she's saying that the demographers don't know where these people came from, it was just an explosion in the population, they're either willfully looking over this fact, they have not dug in this direction, or because like everybody's was taught that all of Europe was white people. You understand what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? So it's I don't know if she has overlooked this or willfully or from ignorance. But either case it goes, these people didn't come from nowhere. These were prisoners of war from the wars I just mentioned, the 11th-Year War and the War of the Grand Alliance. England against Ireland and parts of Germany. These were Irish and Germans who they sent here. And I guarantee you some of them German people in 1751 was probably from a battle or two that had gone on. But I just wanted you to understand, what she's saying is, for some strange reason, we don't know where these people came from. There was an explosion of population, and that's what the explosion came from. Okay? So I'm going to turn this back around.
In the early 17th century. So there were lots and lots of poor British people who were on the public doles, who couldn't find a way to make a living, who couldn't feed themselves. So the king in England was quite happy to have them sign a contract of indenture to then go work in the British colonies.
Now, those prisoners of war were given a choice. You could die in these prisons here in England, or be killed because you're a prisoner of war. You deserve death. But we're going to give you a choice. You can get your freedom through an indenture. We ship you off to America. You'll be an indentured servant for 7 to 10 years. And then after that, you get your freedom. You become a slave for 7 to 10 years, and after which you get your freedom. You see what I'm saying? That's what that was. And like I say, I don't know if she willfully, is this willful ignorance on her part, or she just didn't know. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm gonna. It's always best to assume the best of people if you can. So I'm gonna assume she just don't know. I'm gonna just assume she don't know. And but I'm telling you what the facts show, because again, these people were prisoners of war of those wars, and the King of England needed labor in the Americas. Perfect opportunity for him to clear out his jails, and he did so. And it worked out pretty good for him, right? But again, these people look like you and I. These were black Europeans. A large majority of them were black European, Irish, and German people. Okay, so I'm going to turn this back around.
And that is what happened. Both indentured and enslaved persons, according to historian Edmund Morgan, were sold and traded like cattle. But of course, not all laborers stand equal in terms of their labor agreement or lack thereof. Those who came under a term of indenture worked for a term of years, and presumably this indenture was an agreement that they chose to enter into. The terms of indenture were largely protected by British law, although the terms that took form in colonial North America were quite different than those that existed in England. For example, in England, indentured servants could marry because that was viewed as the way to produce the next group of workers. In this country, indentured servants were prohibited from marrying, and if women were unfortunate enough to get pregnant during their term of indenture, they added usually about 7 to 9 years onto their term of indenture and 1 year to the father. Slavery, of course, was a status that came with life. Work for life. There was neither British law nor international law to prohibit or restrict slavery. What we do know is that at this time period in colonial North America, there were free persons of African descent.
Dodge the hijack. No Africans.
We know that landholders freed slaves. They did so in wills. They did so by allowing them to purchase their own freedom or the freedom of a family member. The vast majority of workers, laborers, in colonial North America at this time were British men, British workers, the vast majority. There were some women, there were some European laborers from Portuguese, Dutch, folks from Ireland and from Scotland are also revealed in the records, but the vast majority were British men. There were small numbers of persons of African descent.
Dodge the hijack.
Smaller numbers of members of native tribes.
Whenever they say African, automatically put in your mind Aboriginal American.
Ladder, and really that ladder should be about as long as this room. The land-holding elite are, in today's parlance, that's the 1%. And the vast majority of folks who were in the colonies were laborers. Again, they were British, other Europeans, Africans, and members of native tribes. Here's what I find folks have the most difficult time with.
This is very important, people. Pay attention.
We tend to really struggle with getting a good picture of social life, the social context at this juncture. We're very good at understanding the social relations that exist later, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But pre-Bacon's Rebellion society is something that we generally in this country struggle to grasp. So I'm going to do my best to paint a broad stroke picture of this time period. What we know is that British and African laborers
Dodge the hijack, not African.
Ate and slept together. Furthermore, the evidence from this period, which covers the first 3/4 of the 17th century, that the anecdotal evidence reveals that they lived under similar conditions and faced the same opportunities and chances to make it once one was free of their term of service, whether free of enslavement.
Okay, so what she's saying here is, she says most people find it hard to grasp this concept because we don't know much about this time frame because it's very strange. But the black and white people that are here during this time frame, pre-Bacon's Rebellion, were treated the same. They lived together, they worked together, they married, they had kids. It's some strange phenomenon. She don't know what was going on during this time. Oh, and by the way, this video is called Birth of a White Nation, and this lady's name is Dr. Jacqueline Batalora. Okay, so that's what she's saying. It's like this is some strange time period where black people and white people were equal. It's hard to wrap your mind around, right? Of course it is, because what she's telling you, I guess, is what she knows of, just like everybody else does, that all Europeans were white. When the fact is, no. Europeans, the Irish, the Scottish, the Germans, the French, these were all dark-skinned people, look like you and me. Benjamin Franklin just told you that. Primary source, right? So she's thinking that these people are all white, when in fact, some of them were black people, some of them was white people. So they were all just European. They didn't see themselves by color. And that's why she said in the beginning part of her statement, there were no white people in America until the late 1600s. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this back around, but that's what she's alluding to. It's like some strange mystery before Bacon's Rebellion. I'm gonna let her finish.
Or free of indenture. So let's review this. British laborers constituted the vast majority of the populations in both colonial Maryland and colonial Virginia. All men, of course, because the law of coverture, let me tell you something about that law of coverture. The law of coverture is derived from British common law, and it structures marriage. And this is how Barrister Blackstone famously described the law of coverture. In marriage, the man and the woman become one, and the one is the man. You didn't have the right to retain your own wages. You couldn't create estate planning, wills, or trusts without the approval of a man. So all men who were free of indenture or enslavement faced the same opportunities in these colonies as a matter of law. For example, free men of African descent could own servants
Dodge
or
the
slaves,
hijack, African.
and they did. They could vote, and they did. They could marry persons of the opposite sex. God, and I love that I have to make that qualification now. Woo! They could marry persons of the opposite sex regardless of national origin, and they did. In fact, marriages between men of African descent and women primarily of British descent were not uncommon at all. In one county, 1/2 of the free men of African descent were married to a European woman. There was a challenge to these marriages, but it did not come from the masses. It came from elites, and that's what we're going to talk about next. All right, this little depiction is meant to be a depiction of the lawmakers in Maryland, colonial Maryland lawmakers. They passed a law in 1664 punishing, and I quote, British and other freeborn women who marry enslaved Negro men. The punishment for entering into these marriages was that the woman herself would be enslaved for her husband's life, and any children they have would be enslaved into their 20s. Now imagine that you are a plantation owner. That's not a bad deal. I get more property. I like that. And that is exactly what happened. Rather than deter these marriages, which is the express intent of the law of 1664, rather than deter them, these marriages were encouraged by property owners, because that in fact, that such a marriage increased their property value. This law of 1664 represents, if not the first, certainly the precursor to anti-miscegenation. These are laws that punished or prohibited marriage between, notice that white people didn't exist yet in 1664, at least as referenced in that law, But most generally speaking, anti-miscegenation law prohibited and punished marriages between a white person and a specific non-white person or persons. Let me be really clear. I read all the time in history books, in academic texts, and I read anti-miscegenation law described as prohibiting interracial marriage. That's not correct. For example, a member of a native tribe could marry a person of Chinese descent. Both were understood as racially distinct, but never did anti-miscegenation law prohibit such kinds of marriages. The only marriages that anti-miscegenation law prohibited were those between a white person and always a person of African descent, and sometimes various other groups. Okay, so just so we're really clear about anti-miscegenation law and its link to whiteness. A couple other things to note about anti-miscegenation law. It's not derived from British law. Anytime we look at law and study history and you see a break from British common law, you always want to pay attention, because it tells us something about the needs and desires of those who wielded power in the colonial context. So anti-miscegenation law was one of these laws. They were passed colony by colony and then state by state. It's a really important area of law for a number of reasons. But for our purpose this morning is because it's where this human category called white first appears on planet.
I want you to see this. She's going to talk about it, but 1861, first appearance of white referenced as a group of humanity. Okay?
Planet Earth. The first time. In addition, anti-miscegenation law is important because it lasted more than 300 years.
Now, just to give that a little context, the first time that the term white was used was then, what I just pointed out. And the reason is, Europeans didn't consider themselves black or white, even though they were black and white, looked like you and I. They were just, in their minds, just Europeans, just from different parts of Europe, Ireland, Germany. You feel what I'm saying? So they didn't see themselves color-wise. They just saw themselves as Europeans, just from different parts of Europe. Okay?
Anti-miscegenation laws literally shaped the faces of this group of more than 2,000 X number of people that I'm looking at today. The Maryland legislature sought to correct for the encouragement of marriages that they described in that previous law of 1664 as, quote, a disgrace, unquote, to the British people, as an indication that the, quote, British or freeborn woman must be forgetful of her status as free, end quote. So they passed the law of 1681. And in this law, it made it illegal for British and other white women from marrying a Negro slave. And furthermore, the law punished any landholder who encouraged the marriages.
Now, again, just to add a little context, British, what does it say? Maryland colony, 1664, English or freeborn woman, disgracing, and then it says freeborn English and other white women. Freeborn English, of course, that means European, and other white people, again, meaning European, punished if they married black people. And black people weren't other European blacks. It was American blacks. You understand what I'm saying? It was American blacks, not Europeans with dark colored skin, because again, and she may have, anyway, the Europeans, it hasn't got to that point yet, but Europeans did not consider themselves by color. They were just Europeans. until this point, they were considered, at this point, they now call themselves white. So in your mind, when you think of white, don't think of the skin color white. Just think of Europeans. Black Europeans and white Europeans were considered white. It was like a tax term, a status of success. But it's going to get to that. I don't want you to be lost by what she's saying, because she's saying a whole lot. I'm letting it play because there's some other information here that's important. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this back around.
And any religious authority who performed it. This law equals the invention of the human category white. Did these group of laborers, some of whom were from Portugal, some from Holland, some from Ireland, Scotland, did they have a little genetic transformation that occurred right after the General Assembly in Maryland met, creating a genetic sludge that we can now call white? Virginia passed its first anti-miscegenation law in 1691. In Virginia, the law prohibited both white men and white women from marrying a person of African descent or a member of a native tribe.
Yeah, I just heard what she said. She just said what I was saying. It prevented white people, i.e., Europeans, both black and white Europeans, from marrying natives. They're gonna put that hijacking the Africans, but it was black people from this landmass. Okay.
But lest I leave you thinking that gender equality was being created in this law, let me quickly dispel that. Studies of antebellum courts reveal that, in fact, anti-miscegenation law was that, at least in the language of the law, prohibited these marriages for white men and white women. But here's what we know from antebellum court cases. We know that plenty of white men married and or engaged in intimate sexual relations with prohibited women. However, very rarely were they brought to court and punished under the anti-miscegenation law. Very rarely. So here, pay attention to this. This law, in its enforcement, is largely focused on controlling the relationality and the sexuality of white women and non-white men. Furthermore, think about the enforcement practices that come out of this particular law. What's the result? Who becomes more available for who? We see a further step in locating patriarchal power squarely among and within white men. We've talked about the law of 1664 and the amendment to that law in 1681. And we've noted that the key difference between those two is the reference to the group who's of concern. The language has shifted from British and other freeborn to British and other white women in that particular law. So the question becomes, well, what the heck happened between 1664 and 1681? And the answer is Bacon's Rebellion. This was a massive revolt in the colony of Virginia that lasted more than a year. Let me give some background of the seeds of this rebellion, what helped give rise to this violent outburst. Those who were enslaved, I don't think it's hard to imagine, were by definition of their status disgruntled laborers. And remember that pool of readily available workers from England who were poor and happily sent off in the guts of ships? Well, they dried up. That population surge ended, and there was no longer a pool of laborers from Britain available to handle the work on the plantations in the colonies. The result is they began to impose harsher punishments on indentured servants who were already here, so that relatively minor infractions would result in significant extensions to their years of service. Those who completed their term of indenture or who were released from their status as enslaved were frustrated. They were frustrated because the King of England gave almost all of the farmable land to his buddies. And even if they could find land to grow tobacco on, prices dropped and taxes went up. So land and other opportunities became much more limited. So this guy, Nathaniel Bacon, the guy pointing his arm, he didn't have to search very far for disgruntled laborers. Both those who were enslaved or indentured faced worse treatment, and those freed faced less ability to make a future for themselves. Persons of European and African descent fought in the first phase of Bacon's rebellion against members of native tribes.
Remember, whenever they say African,
second phase of Bacon's rebellion,
it's a hijack.
Against the British ruling elite. Nathaniel Bacon ultimately died from wounds that he received in a battle, and England sent troops into the colony, and that eventually quashed the rebellion. But not without having made a significant impression upon those who wielded authority and were threatened by this rebellion. Remember, this rebellion lasted over a year, and records from lawmakers in Virginia to the Legal Oversight Authority in England revealed that over 30% of the population were in support of the rebellion. Here were the lessons from Bacon's rebellion. A united labor force is a threat to the form of capitalism taking hold within the colonies. Virginia lawmakers wrote letters to the Oversight Authority in London explaining that they intended to pursue a divide and conquer strategy in order to prevent future rebellion. It's only after Bacon's rebellion that we see the emergence of white people as a group of humanity. Let's think about this for a minute. 1681, some lawmakers invent a new label for a group of people. Imagine, if you will, just for a second, for fun here, that I'm a lawmaker, and I just pass a law claiming that 3/4 of you in this room are crunchies. Okay? So 3/4 of you are crunchies, and the other quarter of you are not. Who gives a damn? Who would care? Some silly lawmaker came up with a label for you. It's really unlikely that it would mean much. But let's say I follow it with this. Those who are crunchies, you can pay no more than $25 a night for that hotel. No more. Those who are crunchies are the first to come into any room at this conference and the first to leave. The first in line at the bathroom, at lunch, at any other line that forms, and the first to get to leave. And that these privileges and advantages that come by virtue of this label that I asserted upon you as a lawmaker continues when you walk out these doors. That it shapes how you are treated and what you get to do for years and years to come. Imagine you're one of the crunchies. Imagine how you might start to feel. Wow, I must be special. Imagine you're not a crunchy. Wow, what's wrong with me? This is not fair. Let's return to the divide and conquer strategy. Laborers prior and through Bacon's rebellion were united. They lived the same darn lives. They faced the same opportunities, rights, and privileges once they were freed from enslavement or free from indenture. That's about to change. A slew of laws were passed in the decades after Bacon's Rebellion and continued to get passed into the first quarter of the next century. The first slew of laws included the prohibition of free blacks from holding public office, the prohibition of blacks and native tribal members from marrying whites, the requirement that whites, upon completion of their terms of service, be paid goods including guns and gunpowder, a prohibition of free blacks possessing a weapon. We're going to come back to that. The prohibition of blacks testifying against whites. These laws began to give different meaning to these labels that prior to this moment just referenced where your nation of origin was. Not anymore. I want to return quickly to a law that prohibited free blacks from possessing a weapon. What this law did was essentially strip free black men of their ability to hold patriarchal power. Because look, under the law of coverture, here's how things worked. Men were in control, controlled women, their spouse, controlled their children, and had legal authority to do so, including severe beatings, all financial assets and land. The man had the control, but the exchange was that in exchange for that authority, he protects. That's the trade-off for patriarchal power. Stripped, made impossible by virtue of this law. And then let's look at this law that prohibited blacks from testifying against white.
Okay, so up to this point, she's explaining that, and you may have already got it, but I'm just going to run back through it. The Bacon's Rebellion happened. It was like a big labor dispute. You had black and white Europeans working side by side, indentured Europeans working side by side with indentured and enslaved native blacks. These people were considered equal. They lived together, married, had sex, and this was before Bacon's Rebellion. It was no problems. It was no problems. They lived, fucked, ate, had everything was good, considered equal. But labor conditions got worse. They weren't being let out of their contracts, so there was an uprising. Some rich people got killed. They squashed the rebellion. The leader died. And so they say, how can we not allow this to happen again? What can we do to make sure that this never happens again? So what they did was they raised the level, the social level of Europeans. The poor Europeans that were indentured servants were now raised to the status of white, which was it was more or less a tax status. People who were the elite Europeans, both black and white, who had money, were considered white. You know what I'm saying? It was a title. These people didn't get no more money or anything. They just was raised up to the category of white, where the native blacks were just kept as being black. And she's going to go over this again, I think. But so that's how they was able to separate the two. And now the people who were raised up to the level of white have all of these privileges. They can buy land, they can vote, marry who they want, whereas the black people can't. You see what I'm saying? Now, during this time, this was considered European domination, not quite racism, white supremacy. This was a precursor to it, but this is just European domination, meaning the people who were from Europe, all parts of Europe, were considered higher than the native blacks. I hope that makes sense. So let's see what else she got to say before we move to the next part.
We will see that throughout U.S. history. Mexicans prohibited from testifying against whites, Chinese prohibited from testifying against whites, and then it just becomes mongrels, the label, to include persons of Japanese descent and the like. So that's a law that we see throughout U.S. history. When you look at these laws, What's the message to white people? Each one of these laws has a message to this new group of people called white folks on the one hand, and a message to those who it denies or restricts on the other. Each one of them. This package of laws, first passed after Bacon's Rebellion, did something extraordinary. Let's imagine that that light up there represents the landholding elite, the 1%. And this represents the socioeconomic ladder in the colony, okay? And so this hand over here represents this new group of laborers called white ones. And this hand over here represents laborers of African descent and members of native tribes.
Dodge the African descent.
Before Bacon's Rebellion and through it, these laborers had the same lives, faced the same opportunities, and that changed. But when you look at these laws that passed that created this change, it divided these, created different meaning for this group versus this group. But it didn't do a whole lot to lift the economic status of white people closer to that of the white elites. Very little movement up. What it did do was it plummeted the bottom, created a new bottom to colonial society, and shoved persons of African descent and
Dodge the
members
hijack,
of native
not
tribes
African
there.
descent, just native blacks.
So let's look at this group of humanity called white people. We learn from this history that white people were built upon the idea that British had of themselves as white, as Christian, as freeborn, as deserving of rights and privileges from which others can be denied. To this day, white people have not been defined as a matter of law to this day. This history teaches us that white is the tool by which laborers were divided. Those who shared the same living conditions, the same opportunities, now experience ourselves as more connected with Paris Hilton than with our African American neighbor, even though our economic status is far more similar to that neighbor than to the lives of the 1%. But not only did this new organization of society create a new bottom to it, it created a link that heretofore had not existed that connected this new group of laborers called white people with the elite. And what was that connection? This shared status called white, embedded with the presumption of its superiority. The other thing to note about the invention of white people and the meaning of white that this history reveals is that white constituted the center of patriarchal power. And we see that most clearly through anti-miscegenation law and specifically through its enforcement. We're going to move from the 17th century into the 18th century.
Okay,
The American Revolution has taken place.
I think we've pretty much got the gist of what she was saying. So I'm going to turn this back around for a minute and get something else queued up. And, basically, what took place, what we've discovered what we've touched on so far is the misconception that all Europeans were white. We now know that the Europeans, thanks to Benjamin Franklin, the Europeans that were white were a very small group of people. The rest of them looked like you and I. Therefore, when the Bacon's Rebellion popped off, the Europeans who were black and white, after the Bacon's Rebellion, the Europeans who were black and white were elevated to the status of the elite, which were considered white people, not because of skin color, but because of a tax status, okay? White people, and the native blacks were just considered black or slaves. You see what I'm saying? So, and again, this period of time was the 1667 after Bacon's Rebellion. This was considered European domination. The system of racism, white supremacy, has not started yet. Right now, it's just a separation between Europeans and Native peoples in America, Native blacks. I hope you understand that. Now, so we're gonna go to further understanding this thing where you had black people, European blacks, who saw themselves not as black but as just European. Okay, and we'll go with Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln described himself in his own writing in a book that he wrote, and I'm going to read his description of himself. So I've got this pulled up in the thing, and it says Abraham Lincoln's autobiography of 1858 through 1860. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit here, and it says, now I want you to see a picture of him right here. I hope you see that, right? But here's a description of him. If any personal description of me is thought desirable. Now, again, this is him describing himself. This is his autobiography. If any personal description of me is thought desirable, it may be said, I am in height 6 feet 4 inches, nearly lean in flesh, weighing on average 180 pounds, dark complexion. Dark complexion. This man is not dark complexion. This is what they do in history books. They whiten these Europeans, right? Dark complexion with coarse black hair. Who has coarse black hair? Black people have coarse black hair. And gray eyes, no other marks or brands recollected. He himself described himself as a black man. He was a black man, right? Of European descent. His people were from Germany. Okay? Now, Abraham Lincoln also, more proof that he didn't consider himself a black man. Let's see if I could find it. Might not be able to. This might be it. Yeah. Abraham Lincoln. Let's see if I proof that he didn't see himself as a black person. He saw himself as just European. He was asked, let me see if I could find this real quick. Okay. And this is a speech. Let me see if it'll pull up here. In 1858, Lincoln expressed an opinion of racial equality and asserted the superiority of white people. Okay? And again, after Bacon's Rebellion in the 1600s, Europeans were considered white people, both black Europeans and white Europeans. So in 1858, Lincoln expressed his opinion of racial equality and asserted the superiority of white people. Now I'm going to read what he said. It says here, during his famous debate with Senator Stephen Douglas, Lincoln expressed to the crowd, I am not, nor ever have I been in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equity of the white and black race, even though he himself is a black person. Back then, if you were European, you were just European. You looked down on black people. They were a whole different race of people to you. It wasn't a color thing. You understand what I'm saying? He says, I am not, nor ever have been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes. Didn't say African, Negroes. And Negroes were American Indians or native blacks, you and I, our ancestors, nor of qualifying them to hold office. Now think about it. He himself is a black man and he holds office. But Negroes shouldn't hold office. See what I'm saying? He was clearly a European, 100% European, 100% European. Now, that's important even to today because you got a whole lot of black people, I call them Negropeans, who are black like you and I, but they have the mind thoughts of racist, white supremacist peoples. And people, the system of racism, white supremacy, when they through with them type of black people, they always break them. They always break their tools. Always. Okay? Let me read on. Negroes, nor qualified in the whole office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and black race, which I believe will forever forbid the two races from living together on terms of social and political equality. And as such as they cannot so live while they do remain together, there must be a position of superior and inferior. And as much as any other man I'm in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. So what he's saying is the superior position is assigned to the European, both black and white Europeans. Simply just Europeans are the superior group, the superior race. I hope that's starting to make a little sense to you. But if not, I'm going to give you a few more factoids. There was a fella, he was a fur trader named George Bongo. And let's pull up what he said. Okay? George Bongo. Now this little article is a little longer than the one I just read, but it's very, very eye-opening, okay? And I won't be reading the whole thing, but here's what George Bongo looked like. This is a picture of George Bongo in 1870. From what this says, I'm assuming, and he is darker than me, right? Okay? So it says here, fur trader and translator George Bongo was one of the first, and it says here African American, but I'm gonna just flat out dodge the hijack. There is no proof of this man ever coming from Africa. I won't get into that, but I won't say African American because I just know that's not the case. This man is of European descent, but I'm gonna read on. So whenever I say African American, I'm just gonna say dodge the hijack. So I'll read it, but I'm gonna say dodge the hijack. And I'll start over. Fur trader and translator George Bongo was one of the first African Americans, dodge the hijack, born in what later became the state of Minnesota. His mother was Ojibwe. She was from the Ojibwe tribe, as were both his wives. Through these relationships, Bongo was part of the mixed racial and cultural groups that connected trading companies and American Indians. He frequently guided white immigrants and traders through the region. Comfortable in many worlds, Bongo often worked as an advocate for the Ojibwe, and I may be pronouncing that wrong, Ojibwe, in their dealings with trading companies and the government. Around 1802, George Bongo was born to an African-American father, dodged a hijack, and his Ojibwe wife. His father, Pierre Bonga. That's a big clue that his father was not African. Pierre, that's a French first name. His father was more than likely from France. But they always, whenever you see a black person in history, it's gonna be, oh, he's African slave, you know. But that's the hijack, folks. You on the right channel. Please hit the bell, hit subscribe, hit the bell, and hit all, and also share this video. Okay, so his father Pierre Bongo was the son of Jean, another French name, Jean Bongo. Jean had been brought to Mackinac Island after the American Revolution by a British officer, either an enslaved man or indentured servant. You see that? I guarantee you he was an indentured servant. Okay? Jean Bongo was freed by the British soldier's death. He married and started a family. Pierre Bongo, meanwhile, worked in the fur trades with the Oweji near Duluth George's younger brother, Stephen Bongo, was also a notable fur trader and translator in the region. Hang with me, I'm headed somewhere. It's very important what this man is going to say. Very eye-opening too. Pierre Bongo was a relatively successful trader, and he sent George to Montreal, which is Canada, for school. Montreal, Canada, French. You starting to see the picture here? These people weren't from Africa. They were Europeans. When he returned to the Great Lake region, George spoke fluent English, French, and Owaji. Bongo followed in his father's footsteps and became a fur trader with the American Fur Company. While working for the fur company, Bongo drew the attention of Lewis Cass. Cass hired Bongo as a guide and translator for negotiations with the Owaji, his Indian tribe, but his wife is from. Bongo's signature is on treaties brokered in 1820 and 1867, respectively. As a translator, Bongo would have had to earn the trust of both sides in a negotiation, and he often moved between white and American Indian communities. Comfortable in white and Owaji societies, Bongo identified with both. Reportedly, Bongo called himself one of the first white men in North Minnesota. He considered himself a white man. Y'all see this? He considered himself a white man. One of the first two white men in Minnesota. Right? He was not speaking of the color of his skin, but instead about his participation in the European American culture. Boom. Boom. I'm going to repeat that. As a translator, Bongo would have had to earn the trust of both sides of the negotiations. And he often moved between white and American Indian communities. Comfortable in white and Owaji societies, Bongo identified with both. Reportedly, Bongo called himself one of the first white men in northern Minnesota. He was not speaking of the color of his skin, but instead about his participation in the European American culture. European American culture. If you were European, black or white, you were white. People, this is the missing link. This is one of the missing links as to why we are so confused. But it's okay. We know it now. And we'll move forward with this knowledge and understanding. See what I'm saying? White was not about a skin color at this particular point in time. It was about the what this thing here says. It was about the European American culture. Very important, okay? Now, let me see if we don't need to go no further. However, he also spoke against white men who treated Owaji trappers unfairly. And I think that's about enough of that article we need to read, right? Okay, so now, again, this article was written, well, it says around 1802, okay? 1802. So we've moved out of the Bacon Rebellion's time when the term white was created for Europeans in America. And we're into 1802 with this George Bongo fella describing, letting you know that he considered himself a white man. And he was blacker than me. But again, he said wasn't about the skin color. It was about the European American culture. Very, very key point. Very key point. And then Abraham Lincoln, of course, he was European of German descent. Now, okay. Now we're gonna move to the important part of this video, which is the fact that the system of racism, white supremacy, is only 162 years old. Okay? Now, we've established the fact that white people didn't exist until after the Bacon's Rebellion. Both black Europeans and white Europeans were considered white people, while black people were the American Indians. Okay? No Africans to mention. These are all black Europeans or black Native Americans, us. Okay? Now, so getting to where the system of racism, white supremacy kicks in. Now, during Lincoln, okay, so I'm going to, I thought I had a little timeline going here, so please forgive me about the pause, but I'm going to play a video, and this video is going to kind of explain a little bit from what the first white lady was talking about. She's saying after the term white was created, it made people feel superior. It made the black and white Europeans feel superior over the black Native Americans. Please, I hope y'all understand it. Okay? Now, I'm trying to see, should I play this video first or play it after? But I think I'm going to play it now because I'm just going to play it. Because this is further going to help you how the system is created. Well, you know what? Let me just say these few things here. At the end of the American Civil War, which was April 9, 1865, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 6 days later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April 15, 1865, right? This was the beginning of the identity theft. This was the beginning of the identity theft. Now, it was a few years before this, Charles Darwin, and I'm going to see if I'm pretty sure I wrote this down here somewhere. 1870, red shirts, the enders. Yeah. In 1859, Charles Darwin wrote a book on the origin of the species and natural selection. And then you had a few years later, his half-cousin, I think his name was Sir Galton. Yeah. Sir Francis Galton created the false science of eugenics in 1883. Now, Charles Darwin writes a book and it starts to get circulated. And it started to plant into the minds of the white Europeans with white skin that they are superior. See, 1859, Charles Darwin writes this book that makes white people start to feel superior. So, when people start to feel superior, they start to act superior. And so, starting in 1859, and then 6 years later, after the Civil War ended, Abraham Lincoln is assassinated. This is when the white skinned Europeans went into the mode that they are superior. And in order for white people to be superior, white skinned people to be superior, guess what has to go bye-bye? Guess what has to disappear off the face of this earth? The black European. The black European has to go bye-bye. So, Abraham Lincoln had to go bye-bye. His ass got assassinated 6 days after the Civil War ended. Okay? And also, America, I'm sorry, I get ahead of myself here because this is the meat and potatoes right here. This is where the rubber meets the road. April 15, 1865, Lincoln is assassinated 6 days after the Civil War ended. The KKK was formed in 1865. This was a terrorist group created to eliminate the identity of black Europeans, also known as the Republican Party during Reconstruction. The KKK was a terrorist group created and used to eliminate the black European. A few years later, after some success in getting rid of some black people in the South and some other places, think about it. The KKK was hanging and killing black people. But who were these black people? Were they just random black people? No. These were black Europeans who owned property, slaves, and land. The KKK was killing people and running them off their property with the help of the government. This started then, and it lasted all the way up past the 1920s during the Red Summer. All of those terrorist attacks that happened, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, every black city and town was targeted and attacked, hidden under the guise of a race riot. No, these were calculated governmental attacks used to hide and destroy and take away the identity of black Europeans who owned land and had money. Some people had influence. A lot of these people were in political positions. Again, the Republican Party. People, you can't make this shit up. The facts are all here. You just have to know how to look at them. Okay? So, and then a few years later, England sent in a big wave. During 1870s and 1880s, a vast majority of white Europeans came from Germany, Ireland, from England, Ireland, and Germany. These white Europeans were now going to replace the numbers of the black Europeans who no longer exist, because what they did was, when Charles Darwin book came out, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and now they lumped all black people, even the black Europeans, into the term black. White supremacy broke its tool, got rid of its Negropean, like that, with a title change. Say, oh no, you're not European, you just a nigger. You just a nigger like these other niggers. And they killed them niggers. Took their land, ran them off their plantations. People, you can't make this shit up, right? So during the 1870s and 1880s, a vast majority of white immigrants came into the colonies from Germany, Ireland, and England to replace the black Europeans. They also formed a group called the Red Shirts, which was another paramilitary group to help further kill the black Europeans and take over their shit. Okay? Now I feel comfortable playing this video, because this video is going to tell you how it happens. It's going to see, because this is what I used to think. I say, well, if there's a system of racism, white supremacy, do white people get together once or twice a year and hold this huge big meeting and say, okay, how are we going to fuck over black people this year? I thought it's a system, so it's got to be somebody in control of the system. It's got to be somebody holding these meetings. What's going on? No, that's not how it works at all. How it works is, you got a little bit of it after Bacon's Rebellion, when all Europeans were elevated to the level of white. Both black and white Europeans were considered white. In the minds of a person who is black-skinned, you see yourself as European, you don't see yourself as black. You may even look like someone else who's black, but nah, that's somebody else. They ain't me, they ain't my peoples. See what I'm saying? But in a system of racism, white supremacy, it's all about color now. It's black and white. When Charles Darwin book came out and became really popular, America decided, hey, we're going to be a white country. And then the world says, we're going to be a white world. In 1859 is when the system of racism, white supremacy took hold. So how did it happen? You know, what happened? I already told you what happened. White people was elevated to the level of white people. And in 1859, the white people said, you know what? Fuck it. Who needs black Europeans? We're going to make this a white country. Let's get rid of the black European. And that's exactly what they did. But let me show you how fast the human mind grabs hold of something and it creates a system that operates and it's self-propelling. Okay? You all are familiar with this young lady. She's an older lady, but I say young lady, but it don't matter. But anyway, Jane Elliott. She did an experiment back in the 60s after Dr. King was killed. She was so upset by them murdering this peaceful man that she said, I'm going to do an experiment in my 3rd grade class to understand this. And here's exactly what she did.
National Brotherhood Week. What's brotherhood? Treat everyone as though he was your brother. And is there anyone in this United States that we do not treat as our brothers?
Yes.
Who?
Yeah.
The black people. Who else?
Indians?
Absolutely, the Indians. Many places in the United States. How are black people treated? How are Indians treated? How are people who are of a different color than we are treated?
They don't get anything in this world.
Why is that?
Because they're different colors.
You think you know how that would feel to be judged by the color of your skin? Do you think you do? No, I don't think you'd know how that felt unless you had been through it, would you? It might be interesting to judge people today by the color of their eyes. Would you like to try this?
Yeah.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Since I'm the teacher and I have blue eyes, I think maybe the blue-eyed people should be on top the first day. I mean, the blue-eyed people are the better people in this room. Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people. This is a fact. The brown-eyed people do not get to use the drinking fountain. You'll have to use the paper cups. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground. Well, the brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are. You ready, Laurie?
Brown-eyed.
She's a brown-eyed. You'll begin to notice today that we spend a great deal of time waiting for brown-eyed people. I don't see the yardstick, do you?
It's coming over there. Hey, Miss Lady, you better keep that on your desk when the brown-eyed people get out of hand.
Oh, you think if the brown-eyed people get out of hand, that would be the thing to use? Who goes first to lunch? The blue-eyed people. Blue-eyed people may go back for seconds. Brown-eyed people do not.
Brown-eyed.
Don't you know?
Oh, they're not smart. And it seemed like when we were down on the bottom, everything bad was happening to us.
The way they treated you, you felt like you didn't even want to try to do anything. It seemed like Mrs. Elliott was taking our best friends away from us.
What happened at recess? Were two of you boys fighting?
Russell called me names and I hit him in the gut.
What did he call you?
Brown eyes. They always call us that.
Yeah,
always call us brown eyes.
What's wrong with being called brown-eyed?
It means that we're stupider.
I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little 3rd graders in a space of 15 minutes. Yesterday, I told you that brown-eyed people aren't as good as blue-eyed people. That wasn't true. I lied to you yesterday. The truth is that brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. Russell, where are your glasses?
I forgot them.
You forgot them. And what color are your eyes?
Blue.
Susan Ginder has brown eyes. She didn't forget her glasses. Russell Ring has blue eyes, and what about his glasses? He forgot them. Yesterday we were visiting, and Greg said, boy, I like to hit my little sister as hard as I can. That's fun. What does that tell you about blue-eyed people?
They're naughty.
The brown-eyed people may take off their collars And each of you may put your collar on a blue-eyed person. The brown-eyed people get 5 extra minutes of recess. You blue-eyed people are not allowed to be on the playground equipment. You blue-eyed people are not to play with the brown-eyed people. Brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. They're smarter than blue-eyed people. And if you don't believe it, look at Brian. I use Orton Gillingham Phonics. We use the card pack. The brown-eyed children were in the low class the first day, and it took them 5.5 minutes to get through the card pack. The second day, it took them 2.5 minutes. The only thing that had changed was the fact that now they were superior people. You went faster than I ever had anyone go through the card pack. Why couldn't you get them yesterday?
We had the collars on.
You think the collars kept you?
Just keep thinking about those collars.
Oh, and you couldn't think as well with the collars on.
Well,
4 minutes and 18 seconds. How long did it take you yesterday?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. How long did it take you today?
4 minutes and 18 seconds.
What happened?
One down.
What were you thinking of?
This.
I hate today.
How do you do? I hate too.
Because I'm blue-eyed.
See, I am too.
There's nothing, it's not funny, it's not fun, it's not pleasant. This is a filthy, nasty word called discrimination. We're treating people a certain way because they are different from the rest of us. Is that fair?
No.
Nothing fair about it. We didn't say this was going to be a fair day, did we?
No.
And it isn't. It's a horrid day. Are you ready? What did you people who are wearing blue collars now find out today?
I know what they felt like yesterday.
I did too. How did they feel yesterday?
Like a dog on a leash. Yeah. Like you're chaining them up in the prison. Like you're shut up and you're throwing the key away.
Should the color of some other person's eyes have anything to do with how you treat them?
No.
All right, then should the color of their skin?
No.
Should you judge people
No.
by the color of their skin?
No.
When you see a black man or an Indian or someone walking down the street, are you going to say, look at that silly looking thing?
No.
Does it make any difference whether their skin is black or white?
No.
Or yellow?
No.
Or red?
No.
Is that how you decide whether people are good or bad?
No.
Is that what makes people good or bad?
No.
Now you know a little bit more than you knew at the beginning of this week.
Yes.
Okay, now are you back?
Yes.
That feel better?
Yes.
So you see, people, the system of racism, white supremacy is a self-generating thing. You know, these people, based on Charles Darwin's book, started to form the opinion that they were superior. And what instantly they went into white superior mode. They killed off the black European. Step number 1. They killed off the black European. Their own brothers and sisters, so to speak, from their own country. That was almost act number 1. Created a whole terrorist group called the KKK to accomplish that. Because you cannot have white supremacy if you have black people who are also superior. Y'all see how this works? This is why this evil system has to come to an end. What you're learning right now helps to end the system of racism, white supremacy. Because these are hardcore facts. Documentative facts. Things that we've never been allowed to look at before. You understand what I'm saying? That's why this channel is so important. Please, if you have not already, subscribe to this channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit all, so that you'll be notified when I go live or upload another video. Share this video out to your social media platforms. Go back and watch all of my videos and share those out. Because this this government has been at war against the black Native American for 529 years. And it started again with Christopher Columbus. Now, and to me, knowing this, it empowers me, because I feel like, wow, you know what I'm saying? This is incredible. You know what I'm saying? Everybody needs to know this, right? And that's why you were important, because you can help me get this information out, you know? So you might be saying, well, okay, well, how can I use this information to help destroy the system of racism, white supremacy? By sharing it out. You're no longer fighting an invisible beast. It's kind of like if you were fighting a ghost and you was able to throw paint on it. Now you can see where it's at. It can no longer hit you without you seeing it coming. You know what I'm saying? It now has a face. It now has a body. You know, we can deal with it. It's real. It's not a myth. It's not a puff of smoke. You understand what I'm saying? And, you know, so, you know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent like that, but I think I've hit all my points. I really think I've hit all my points. I'm looking down my paper here. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm gonna recap this thing. In 1859, Charles Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of the Species, dealing with natural selection. White people, white-skinned Europeans, took these ideas to heart. They immediately went on they immediately started to act superior, like these little white kids in the 3rd grade. So, because of this newfound thought that they're superior from their DNA, they created a killing organization called the KKK to eliminate the black European, to lump the black European into the same group as the native blacks. And therefore, you're just black now, nigger. You're just black. And then they went on a killing spree and campaigns to take these people up off of their land. You see what I'm saying? And so this is heinous what took place, but it's absolutely the truth. And it's something that's not taught in history. It's something that even if white people do know this, because they think they're superior, they will avoid this topic at all costs. They'll have cognitive dissonance behind it and everything. So we can't look to white people to solve this problem for us, because they'll lose their falsehood. They'll lose their fake power. And that's what they need to lose. They never should have had it in the first place. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I may have to go over this subject again. The more I talk about it, the more smoother I can flow with it, and I can get more information out to you. But there was another person who I'm gonna see if I can put a video about this person in the description. Now this fella, he was. I'm gonna see if I can read something about this fella real quick. Let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna start it like this. A little bit more proof that there were black European slave owners and plantation owners. There's a book, Black Slave Owners, Free Black Slave Masters in South Carolina from 1790 to 1860 by Larry Coger. If you get a chance, get this book. Now, when you get this book and you read it, you can now read it with the understanding of what we've talked about, that these were black Europeans. You understand? Or they were indigenous black people who worked out their indenture, had money, and now are in the business of a plantation. And I have to tell you folks too, a lot of times when you see a person who was indentured, a lot of times they were indentured to their father or somebody in their family. It wasn't that they were a slave from someplace else. No, a lot of the times those were family members, because you got benefits. If you own land and you had a slave or an indentured servant, the government would give you additional acres of land, sometimes 50 acres per indentured servant or slave. So if you had a child that was of age to work and you said, oh, put them on the books as your slave or your indenture, you could grow your farm. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of things that we've been taught aren't quite 100% the way it was. And I'm telling you this because there is a black slave owner named this fella here. Let me see if William Ellison, right? William Ellison, he was a plantation owner in South Carolina, one of the richest slave owners, and he was a black person. Look at his clothes. He was a black European, in fact. But it's a fellow who I follow, who went into this person's genealogy to prove what I'm telling you about. This dude his genealogy proves that he's from Europe. His people, his father, grandfather, from Europe. He was an indenture to his family members, and he became very wealthy. You know, he was an asshole because he owned slaves and he treated them harshly. But anyway, I'm going to try to put his video in the description so that you could further get a grasp of what I'm talking about these black Europeans. And the person who I follow, who is a man, he goes into documents that's from the way back. You know what I'm saying? He do a good job. This guy, his name's Kurimio Aha. So I'm gonna try to put, again, this guy, and his name is William Ellison, in the description. You know, because I think if you see what I'm telling you for yourself, it'll help you. You know, because this is a huge bit of information that almost nobody knows. Hell, you got black people in Europe that don't know this information. You understand what I'm saying? And it's our job to get them this information, because a lot of them, they're family members. You know, I mean, anyway, people, y'all on the right channel. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, hit all, and share this video out. Share all my videos. And also, too, I do teach the information that I was exposed to. I've taken and filtered the videos. This video information. You could just sit back, pop some popcorn, and just watch them. They're in a certain sequential arrangement that allows you to flow through the information, and the cobwebs in your brain are just dissolved. Where I give you an example. Let's say it took me maybe 3 years to get this understanding. You'll get it in a matter of hours. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Matter of hours. Now, that's $49 for the video material only. Then also offer the video material with coaching, and I call it hand holding, because when you get this type of information, because we're prisoners of war and we suffer from Stockholm syndrome, post-traumatic slave syndrome, we suffer from everything, but our minds are scrambled like a Rubik's Cube. So, and we also suffer from cognitive dissonance too, because of the system of racism, white supremacy. We have an unhealthy love for our enslavers through all kinds of the systems, the education, religion. We're taught that our savior is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person in the sky, and that's very damaging to the very black mind. But again, that's what coaching is for. I hold your hand for 4 weeks. We're going to meet 1 hour a week for 4 weeks to go through the information and to get you through the downturns. What do I mean, downturns? Well, your false identity is going to die. Your African American identity is going to die, and your Aboriginal identity is going to rise. But because when somebody die or some person die, you're going to go through the 5 stages of grief. And because you're being coached by me, I'm holding your hand, that transition is going to be a lot smoother. I didn't have that when I went through this information, so it was a little tougher. That's why I want to offer it to you, so that you don't have to go through it alone. You know what I'm saying? And you'll go through it quicker. You know. Now, going through all of this, I don't know if you picked up on this, but a lot of you all not only have Aboriginal black heritage, a lot of you all, just like me, that I found out in my family, I also have Irish and German ancestry. These were more than likely black Irish and black German people down my family line. You understand what I'm saying? So it's very important that you get this information in you and you do this. My battery is low, so I don't want to. I'm gonna end this video right now. But Dr. Francis Cress Welson's video is going to be in the description. William Ellison's video is going to be in the description, and I want y'all to watch both videos. And if you get a chance, in the comments, just put, hey, thumbs up, great information. I watched everything. Let me know that you're going to share this information out. Let me know if you're interested in the course. Hit me up on my email, which will also be in the description, that you want to take the course. Let me know which one, and I'll reach out back to you and see if I can get you in the class. Okay, be one family, and I'm out.